Around 2017, the Chinese government began to censor its online novels, which had mostly been ignored up until that point. One of the many books that ended up getting completely removed due to these new policies was Gu Zunren's Reverend Insanity, which in May of 2019 was basically purged from the Chinese internet. Social stability is something the Chinese government really likes, and so they want media that promotes things like unity, nationalism, and family values.
Made in China, China 牛逼, China number one.
Number one in making the virus.
Shut the fuck up, okay?
Obviously, Reverend Insanity doesn't really promote those things, and it also may have included a couple references to some certain real-life political figures. Fortunately for you though, if you're watching this, you most likely live in a place free from the censorship of the Supreme Elder. Lucky you, white boy. Unfortunately though, the story was cut short, if you count 2,334 chapters as short. But even without having a proper ending, I still think it's a very good book, and going by web novel standards, it is objectively one of the best in terms of writing. However, what makes this book so good is also what makes it so divisive to many people, which is basically what I'm going to be talking about in this video. Reverend Insanity is a novel in the mystical genre of Chinese fantasy, specifically Xianxia. Xianxia. Xianxia novels and shows take place in worlds mostly based on some form of ancient China, with the addition of more magical elements like dragons and flying swords and stuff. The subgenre that's most prevalent is the Cultivation subgenre, where characters do things to become stronger or extend their lives. These things could be anything from tempering your body, consuming strange pills, or maybe meditating for 1,000 years. All of these techniques could be defined as methods of cultivation, and the cultivation systems that they're a part of could be more or less unique depending on the book they're from. Over the years, due to online publishing sites and fan translations, these kind of novels have gotten more popular with the foreign devils. They're kinda like the Chinese version of isekai in that there's a lot of them, but they all seem to follow the same structure and have the same plot points and stuff. Also, a lot of them are power fantasy wish fulfillments. If you are at all familiar with this genre of web novels, then you will most likely recognize the two tropes that are shown in the first chapter of the book. The story begins with the main character of the series, Fang Yuan. His efforts to refine the mysterious spring-autumn cicada have led to him being hunted down by the righteous path. He is surrounded on all sides, and there is no way out.
Fang Yuan, quietly hand over the spring-autumn cicada, and I'll give you a quick death. Old bastard Fang, stop attempting to resist anymore. Today, all of the major factions of justice have combined together just to destroy your devil lair. Demon! 300 years ago, you insulted me, took away my body's purity, killed my entire family, and executed my 9 generations. From that moment onwards, I hated you with a burning passion. Today you will die!
Fang Yuan understood his situation clearly, but even in the face of death, his expression remained calm. His previous life on Earth emerged before his eyes. He was originally a Chinese scholar on Earth who chanced upon this world. About over 500 years of his life flew by in the blink of an eye. In the end, he had failed. Yet there were no regrets. To be a demon is to be merciless and cruel, a murderer and destroyer. There is no place in heaven or earth for such a thing. But if the spring-autumn cicada that I have cultivated is to be effective, then I shall still be a demon in my next life. With this thought, Fang Yuan couldn't help but let out a big laugh. With a loud bang, Fang Yuan was engulfed in a blinding surge of energy, and he disappeared into the river of time. A transmigrator on his way to be reborn 500 years in the past. Both very commonly seen tropes in these kind of books. And it's not just these two. There are plenty of others that you might be able to spot while reading. And that's because it was written as sort of a response to other popular media at the time. At least the first arc was. The following is a preface written by Gu Zunren before starting his work on Reverend Insanity. It was around 5 or 6 years ago when I had already been reading novels for a while. I read numerous novels, but a certain frustration accumulated in my heart. The protagonists I read about were mostly extraordinarily lucky, righteous and of high moral character. In contrast, the antagonists were usually portrayed as foolish, crazy and ugly, formidable in name, but paper tigers who faltered as soon as they encountered the protagonists. In some TV dramas, it often plays out like this. The villain defeats the protagonist and is just one step away from delivering the fatal blow. Then the villain starts to babble, giving the protagonist time to secretly gather strength for a final counterattack, which inevitably succeeds. If the roles were reversed with the villain at a disadvantage, the scenario would play out like this. After the protagonist shows their power, the villain is defeated and collapses onto the ground. Facing the protagonist's sword, the villain suddenly bursts into tears, swearing to reform. The kind-hearted protagonist hesitates, giving the villain a chance for a desperate counterattack, which of course fails. Some villains, whenever they kidnap the protagonist's relatives and friends, almost never succeed in their threats. Even with a great advantage, they inexplicably get defeated by the protagonist due to various unforeseen factors. And thus, I thought about seeing a true villain. This dream had been deeply buried in my heart. Over the years of writing, I had several times thought of starting it, but ultimately did not. Sometimes I was afraid, feeling my writing skills were not enough. Even if I occasionally thought of it, I felt I was not prepared enough, not capable of writing such a thrilling story. However, these days, I stopped my continuous progress, looked back and suddenly understood a truth. Life has no preparation. Even if everything is ready, isn't there always a need for a favorable wind? And so I want to realize an old dream. I want to recapture past emotions, and therefore this book will be very different from others, even from my previous works, because the protagonist of this book is a great villain, stopping at nothing to achieve his goals, extremely evil. He will be ruthless, no matter how beautiful the opponent is. If they are enemies, he will resist. No matter how strong they are, he will fight. No matter how beautiful, he will kill without hesitation. Yes, this book will kill women and kill beauties extensively. Those who become weak-kneed at the sight of beauties or have hearts in their eyes or expect romantic encounters will not find it in this book. Undoubtedly, this will be a controversial book. Yes, I openly admit this is a book with incorrect views. Reading is for fun and a hobby. This book is very evil. Read with caution. Those who want to read it are welcome. Those who can't stand it, feel unhappy, or feel their outlook on life, values and morals are being trampled, I respectfully see you off. Reading is for joy. If it doesn't bring you happiness, if it doesn't make you happy, then don't read it. Change to another book. This is the preface of this book and also a statement. So in summary, he just wanted to see better villains, and so he decided to write one himself, which I think is a pretty cool thing to see in the context of one of these settings. It's kinda like if Euron Greyjoy was the protagonist of a shonen anime, and he's trying his very best to become the strongest. I just think it's a fun concept, although it has the potential to be really cringe depending on how it's written. Something that I notice is common in these kind of web novels, and one of the things that I don't really like, is when the author wants the main character to be a villain, and yet they seem to be afraid of having people hate them. And so they end up with a bunch of side characters who only exist to describe the main character as cold and ruthless. And when they do something cold and ruthless, it's usually to someone who deserves it because they've already done something to the main character or something like that. His gentle personality changed into that of a cold, ruthless, brutal, bloodthirsty, unstable and sadistic killer, capable even of abandoning a person to death without a second thought. Hajime developed a habit of smiling in front of danger, which prompted Shea to call him a new species of monster, called a predator. Hearing this description, you would imagine someone with these characteristics to be a pretty vile individual. In practice though, none of these traits are ever applied in ways to make the main character look remotely negative to the reader, except maybe one of them, but that's unintentional. He might act like a brutal and sadistic killer, but it's to a guy who also happens to be the most disgusting human being possible. Like he owns a child slave organ drug factory or something. I just think it defeats the purpose of being a brutal and sadistic killer. I also don't like it when moral judgments are applied unevenly, and yet it's never acknowledged in the book. Like brutally executing the nameless thug, and yet sparing the icy princess assassin sent to kill you.
She has a tragic backstory, guys.
A more recognizable form of this would be in the new Star Wars, where they pick and choose which stormtroopers to humanize and which ones to use for Marvel one-liners. Keep in mind, it's totally fine if you enjoy any of the stuff I'm making fun of. Don't let my judgment of things ruin your enjoyment. I will admit there are a few we live in a society moments in the first couple chapters of Reverend Insanity. But Guzhen Ren is never afraid of portraying Fang Yuan as anything other than what he is. Every 10 years in the northern plains, there would be a terrifying natural disaster. A great blizzard that would last for months on end. Cold winds would whip around like blades and white snow would blanket the earth. The whole vast plains would freeze into a world of ice and snow. Only by entering the imperial court would a mortal be afforded protection. But the quota to enter is limited, and so tribes would form large-scale groups to go through battle with each other, and after eliminating the weak, the winners would gain safety as well as rewards that lay within the imperial court-blessed land. Of course, this was by design, to strengthen the northern plains as a whole, as well as to preserve the dominance of the Huangjin bloodline. Fang Yuan isn't of that bloodline, nor is he even a northern plains native, but he's there anyway, for the purpose of reaping as many benefits as possible in the chaos. To blend in, he killed a northern plains native and used the demonic technique of literally wearing his skin. Throughout his travels, Fang Yuan has managed to obtain a powerful but incomplete zombie transformation. If used for too long, this technique has the drawback of being permanent, which Fang Yuan doesn't want since it would stagnate his cultivation. And so he would like to find a way to reverse the transformation, just in case. To resolve this issue, Fang Yuan will need someone cooperative who listens to him, risking their lives to undergo this experiment. Where was he going to find such a person? Of course, being the resourceful individual that he is, Fang Yuan will extract every possible benefit he can from his current identity, and so he will use the kid who thinks this skinwalker is his father. Using his need for parental love, Fang Yuan manipulates him into turning into a monster, all the while making him think it's his fault. And now that he has his subject, the experiments can begin. Fang Yuan controlled many worms which floated around the face of the boy. Some drilled into his skin, while others mixed into his blood, flowing towards his heart. The intense pain assaulted him again. He gritted his teeth in pain, but he soon opened his mouth and growled, his expression twisting from the pain. Fang Yuan's movements were smooth and methodical. The more worms that were added in, the more intense the pain he felt. He struggled desperately, his eyes rolling as he felt pain to the point of losing reason, almost as if he was becoming deranged. He began to scream. But Fang Yuan acted like he did not hear it, continuing to add more regardless of what was going on. His eyes were shining. Fantastic! This is the final one. Success or failure will depend on this. Oh. Fang Yuan's expression froze. The surrounding worms were breaking apart like the scattering of fireworks. The boy no longer struggled. He was floating in the air motionless. He was dead. His soul had shattered and dissipated from the pain. His expression, however, was very calm. The surroundings became dead silent. Fang Yuan's brows lifted, laughing lightly. At least I got to find out how stubborn this killer move's flaw truly was. He did not die in vain after all. Wholesome Chungus. If Fang Yuan thinks he can benefit from it, there is genuinely no low that he will not hesitate to sink to. He will happily accept any kindness that you give him, and then stab you in the back to steal anything else that you may have been holding. He'll also capture your soul and then torture you until he knows everything about your loved ones, and then do the same to them. Morals will not stop him. Shame will not stop him. Not wanting to be trampled on. There are two ways. One is to become strong. Strong until no one dares to step on you. Another is to turn into dog shit. Something no one would want to step on. But despite him being someone that you would probably never feel comfortable being around, you can't help but root for him. It's shown in the first chapter that Fang Yuan is a regressor, a 500-year-old man who returns through time to his youth. But before that, he was a normal human from Earth. How would 500 years change such a person? From friendship, riches and love, to hatred, sadness and poverty, after experiencing everything that life has to offer, again and again. How long until everything starts to lose meaning? Reputation, honor, threats and promises. Time washes it all away. Eventually, Fang Yuan stopped caring about the transient pleasures of life. The death of a human began to feel no different than that of a fox, or a pig, or a tree. Even the fear he held towards death had long since disappeared. The only thing that remained was disappointment. Was this really all that life had to offer? But there was something else. Something that could bring color back into the life he had grown so tired of. A dream that he had almost forgotten. If it's the fate of everything to fade away into nothing, rendering all actions meaningless, then naturally, the only true meaning that exists lies in eternity. Nothing else matters. But even in a setting where individuals have the power to crush entire cities, it's delusional. Insanity, perhaps. Even those who have reached the very pinnacle of existence, living for thousands and thousands of years, have all faded through the passage of time. Fang Yuan is just another star in the infinite skies. He is an opportunist struggling to survive in a cutthroat world, in the pursuit of his impossible dream. He understands that he will most likely die, but he accepts this, because his true purpose isn't really eternity. What he really wants is to feel the excitement of life and the desire towards living that he feels while trying to achieve this unimaginable goal. A goal that may not even be possible. But even if it ends in complete failure, alone and forgotten, even if it all amounts to nothing, even if you are insulted and laughed at, living true to yourself and true to your dreams, as long as you tried your very best, what is there to regret? This nature of his works really well to make him the primary driving force of the story. Instead of a chosen one prophecy or a childhood friend getting kidnapped, Fang Yuan is the one initiating the conflict like 90% of the time, because eternal life lies on the path of cultivation, and cultivation requires resources. The cultivation system of Reverend Insanity is divided into 9 ranks. Ranks 1 to 5 known as Gu Masters, and ranks 6 to 9 known as Gu Immortals. I'm sure it sounds a lot cooler in Chinese. A Gu Master is someone who has opened their mortal aperture within their body, which produces and stores primeval essence. This primeval essence is used to manipulate Gu, which are little creature things, each with separate abilities. You can think of primeval essence as the mana and Gu as the spells. Generally speaking, around 5 out of 10 people have the talent to become a Gu Master. If you are lucky enough to be able to cultivate, then the next most important factor would be determined by your aptitude. Your aptitude is basically the maximum amount of primeval essence that your aperture can hold. This affects the amount of spells you can cast before running out of essence, but more importantly, having a low aptitude can limit you from breaking through to higher realms. Fang Yuan has a C-grade aptitude, which means it will be almost impossible for him to break through to even rank 3 through natural means. This is where the main source of conflict arises from. For various reasons, Fang Yuan is always in need of a vast amount of resources, and he will do everything he can to get his hands on them. And I mean anything. Having such a solid progression system combined with someone willing to take advantage of every aspect of it is part of why I like this book. Of course, Fang Yuan is what makes it stand out so much. He really is one of a kind, even outside the role of main character. If you weren't completely put off by Fang Yuan's lack of any morals, then I suggest you go give it a try maybe. I know this wasn't really much of a review, more so just telling you what you should expect should you choose to read it. I do want to keep expectations at a reasonable level though, so I will go over some criticism real quick. Obviously, there are the many flaws that you often find in these kind of web novels, like translation issues, although that's not the fault of the author, and a release schedule resulting in some filler. A lot of people complain about the Northern Plains arc and the following zombie arc, which I will say I understand in regards to the Northern Plains arc. And last but not least, there is the fact that the story will most likely never receive an ending. Which is really unfortunate because after the zombie arc, the story gets exponentially better. The final chapter literally includes an author's note where he's hyping up the next fight, which I think is kind of funny. But in a certain way, this band suits the story perfectly. Because to Fang Yuan, it was never about the destination. Even though different arcs have come and gone, even though changes happen, time has passed and everything moves, Fang Yuan is still himself, pursuing the impossible, always rushing towards his dream of eternal life. And so with this band, his journey, the thing that gives his life meaning, can continue on forever.